All right, it is time for my currently reading challenge weekly reading wrap up and recap for week 2. Hey everyone, it is Shannon and I'm super excited to be here today and to share with you this video. This is going to be me sharing the results of how my second week of working on my currently reading went. Technically my third week because I did do a dress rehearsal as a week 0, but you know. It's all good. It's all good. So as my goal is to read 75 pages a day, 5 days out of the week of the 5 titles that I picked. I picked 2 nonfiction and 3 fiction, and that's what I work with for the week. So as always, I will start with the least pages read to the most pages read, and we'll see how I did. First up, I read 5 whole pages of outline alphabets, 100 complete fonts. This one is more of an activity as reading because each page is an alphabet, and I then try to make the alphabet happen. So I did that. I shared last week. I got the same book last week, and I continued, and I had a great time yet again. So, and I will leave the titles of the alphabets. This is Aurelio outline, but I will leave the names of the alphabets down below if you're curious. This one was the first one I did. It's actually pretty standard, except for sometimes the inside and outside lines touch. That's actually quite unusual. They touch there, they touch there. I made it too tall, so I had to scale it. That's been one of the hardest challenges, is trying to figure out what the height is. But yeah, this whole touching thing, that is very unusual. I'm having, I think, the most trouble with S's, which is kind of ironic because my name is Shannon, so I write S's a lot, but I have like the way that I write S's. So it's a very hard challenge, I find, because this part is almost always the exact same width, but then I'm like, how do you turn the curve there and there? So I'm still struggling with that. I got a little better as the week went on. So this one was a pretty interesting alphabet. On the surface it feels pretty similar, but this whole like curving in and having different what's that called, widths, like how it's not consistent widths for some of the, how they curve in sometimes, and this slanted O. For the O's, if you're curious, I always draw the inside O first. For O's and Q's are almost always exactly the same, except for the Q, I don't know, extension. But yeah, see how this has a big O, an oval on the diagonal? That's actually quite unusual. But with O's, I always draw the inside O first, and then try and be consistent around getting the, look at what the difference is. See how it's closer here and further away here? A lot of times they're pretty equidistant, but that one wasn't. So yeah, so that was a pretty good one. This one I think was the most elaborate that I have done so far. My goodness gracious. I did this one in a marker because it had a thicker line, so I went with a marker for this one over a Sharpie, or like a, I use a Sharpie pen for most of them, but it's not a regular Sharpie, it's just a, look at that kind of pen, which is what I prefer for this type of work. But this one, my goodness gracious, especially the M, that M, oh my, I did it twice. I think the first one was actually better, but it feels like brushwork, and a stencil at the same time, and it was quite, I can't remember what it felt like to do it, but I was very excited when I turned the page and saw this as the one to do. And then I actually did start changing up how I did, because I was starting to run out of space on the page. So I started to do all the lowercase that had an extension up on one line, all the ones that were just like A, O, O, like on the midline, and then ones that had extension down on the bottom line. And that sort of helped with spacing. So like the T a lot. The S, that was an easier one to do. The O was tough. The V had this big extension. The W, very elaborate, very elaborate. So that one was a lot of fun. And then this one, this one was interesting. I like the Q had quite the extension here. This one was interesting. I found, I like the G. I think that a fair amount. It didn't so much feel like an outline one, and I don't know if that's because I colored some in. I colored it in when I made a mistake. And this one had the symbol for pound. Is it the symbol for pounds? And yeah, that one was an interesting one too. I don't have too much to say about that one. It did feel a bit more stencily, maybe? Not really, no. Lowercase had to go on a separate page, and I did a word, welcome, and I did welcome, which is the Danish. Because this one was called Bauer Denmark on outline. So I did it. Still working on my Duolingo. I was not the best. And then this one was another pretty standard, with lots of serifs ones. I was getting a little, at this point I was getting a little like, okay, I feel like I've seen these, like some alphabets, some styles you see a fair amount. Like this, well, this L has a bit of an upturn, but like some of it seemed pretty standard. So I decided to do the alphabet backwards to be more engaging. That W needs a little work. I was a little impatient this day, but I still got it in. And it was interesting to do it backwards because I was really fine. Oh, I like the J. That's a great J. I like that one. But yeah, so to keep engaged, I decided to do it backwards. And then this was the last one that I did. And this one was challenging too because it had very thick outline and very consistent. And my marker was getting a little dry, so the edges weren't as sharp. So I used these color peps, which have a bit of a different style. And that was actually really good to have a consistent outline, because that's the thing, like when you're going this way, when you turn, to have a consistent thickness, it's not easy on the hand to do that. So I think it ended up pretty well. I think I did an okay job. Not that wide. Had to do it twice. If I mess up a letter, I do try and do it twice. This one took a lot of time to get, because it did have these pointy bits as well on the edges. And then when you do a lighter color, you see if you go over it more than once, it's darker. See how it's darker on the edge? So I was a bit finicky about that. Anyway, I am really happy to that the title came up again, and I spent more time. I'm actually really surprised I was able to get 5 alphabets in, but I'm very happy about that. And if it doesn't come up next week, I don't know if I will continue to do it, but I do still want to get time at the desk doing in my sketchbook, doing lettering or anything, or drawing or anything. So I hope that I can keep that up. This has been 2 weeks in a row, so if the title doesn't come up, I still want to get to the page. So yeah, so hopefully I will do that. So that was the least pages. I have 89 left for that one. Next up, I have the history of reading. I read 92 pages of this, which is actually a pretty good amount for nonfiction work, and it was really interesting. There was one chapter that was a little not super interesting. I'll be honest, there was one that I was not a fan of. There was one about private reading, and when books became available to people, so they didn't need to have them told to them out loud. There was a big part about the library in Alexandria. I was pretty tired when I read that one, so I didn't get a good sense of that one. But actually that is a subject and a place that I would like to know more about. And they did talk about copying books, and when that started to happen, and at that time it was scrolls. So even that was really interesting and engaging. So this was a really good pick. I'm really enjoying it. So I have 118 pages left. So I am really thrilled about that, because now I'm actually around or past the halfway point, because this is about 300 pages. So I feel like the end is in sight. I will eventually get to the end of this book. So that feels good. That always feels good. Next up, I read 143 pages of The Bourne Identity, and I did get to the second volume. I made these into a 3-volume set because it's 600 pages. So I am in the second volume at 208 pages. So I have 391 pages left. It is 600 pages. So I'm about a third of the way through. So I'm happy about that. That being said, this was definitely my least favorite read of the week. There are some really crappy gender things that happened in this one. I really am not liking the character of Bourne, which is really too bad, because I love the movie so much. But in this, he's a bit of a jerk, especially to a woman character, and very targeted, very he was very threatening and intentionally threatening and hit her repeatedly, I think like 4 times on between 2 pages, I was like, this is not what I was expecting. So I do feel like it did sort of it didn't even out, because you can't, to be honest, I don't think you can come back from that. But given his character, no, even with the character with the amnesia, no, so I am struggling with this one, but for some reason I had no problem reading it, because it sort of turned, and I realized I wasn't going to like the character, and it wasn't going to be, and then I was happy with the changes that they made in the film with the character. And so I am curious as where it's going to go. I'm taking it more of a sort of like the thriller, action, adventure, and that it's outdated. And it is from, when is it from? Is it from the 80s or the 90s? 1980. So is unfortunately a fair amount of time since now, or maybe fortunately. So again, if this was written today, I don't think the gender dynamics would be what they were, but I found a lot of like that whole section, and I thought the abuse towards the woman character was just really horrible, and I didn't want to read it, so that sucked. But I do want to finish it. It's one of the oldest books on my Goodreads TBR. If it wasn't, and if I didn't have a physical copy, I probably would have just let it go, but I think I am going to continue now that I am a third of the way through. So there's that. And then next up, I read 145 pages and 4 stories from The Progress of Love by Alice Munro. I am shocked at this. This is Canadian fiction. Usually Canadian fiction takes me so long to read. It might have something to do with the font, which is, it kind of feels like it's in bold, but for my reading pace for this was way higher than I expected. It wasn't a page per minute, but it was close. I think it was maybe 50 pages an hour, not 60. Which 60 pages an hour is a page a minute. And so I read 4 of the stories. I had varying degrees of enjoyment of the story, so I'm a little surprised at that, because previously I've enjoyed Alice Munro's work. There's a couple of, again, outdated things. This is from, I think, the 80s again. 86. So there was one that I can't remember. It was like the first one I read this round, and there was something about it. Oh, it was a depiction of a character, and I actually do not know what the correct term is. But I think maybe now we would say someone on the spectrum. And so that was complicated. But some of the other stories I did really enjoy. And some of them, like a lot of them are, like a lot of Canadian fiction, are about sort of a complicated life relationship stuff. And so, I guess with anything like that, some you'll be interested in or relate to or speaks to you more. I don't even necessarily think it has to be relatable to speak to you, but I struggle when that's because for me that's not, I don't necessarily need to relate to something to enjoy it or appreciate it. So I struggle sometimes when that seems to be what people think is good, is when they relate to it. I'm like, wow, you're missing out on so much. Wow, I'm very diverging on stuff. So anyway, but there was 2 out of the 4 I really enjoyed. One was the last one I read, which was also complicated, called The Moon in the Orange Street Skating Rink. I didn't even read the titles, to be honest. And then I don't remember what the other one was. Oh, Miles City, Montana. That one I really liked a lot. That was my favorite. So yeah, so it has gone well. And so now I have 5 stories left and 201 pages to go. So I hit the halfway point with this one. So that is huge success. I'm very, very happy about that. And then the most pages read, I read from Heating Up the Holidays. This is a collection of romance novellas under the Harlequin Blaze line, and I finished off the one by Jackie D'Alessandro and Jamie Sobrato. I don't have the names here. say them. So anyway, so now from this one, so this isn't necessarily the last one, because this is one of those situations where the copy I have for Kindle doesn't have page numbers. So I am estimating a little bit on how much I read. I ended up in my daily count, I just went with, I downloaded it from Overdrive to my tablet, and I used that as the page count while I was reading throughout the week. That page count is not, it's more consistent because I actually had page numbers, but it's, if on Overdrive on the app, if you change the font size, it changes the page number. So I picked the regular font size that I use, but the pages were more, like the amount of pages that I read on Overdrive was 237. And I don't have it as a huge font, but it's a large screen. So anyway, so it was 237 pages, or my previous estimation left for this book was 128 pages. So I'm not, but that was an estimation calculation for a Kindle book. And this is one of a set of 3 in a bind up of 6 titles, where this is a third of one of them. So I'm just like, I don't even know. So anyway, I either read 128 pages or I read 237 pages. I am not totally sure, but I am sure that I have 0 pages left. I finished a title. I'm thrilled about this. This is 2 weeks in a row, 3 if you count the dress rehearsal week. And so I'm really, really happy about this. I started this last holiday season in November. I don't read seasonally, so it was actually fine because I didn't need it to be seasonal to read this title and finish it off. I had some hesitation with the story I was in the middle of, because I thought it's a male-female relationship, and the guy was very pursuant of the woman, and she had said she was seeing someone, so he stopped bugging her or, making advances. But then when he found out she wasn't seeing anyone, he started making advances again. And I'm like, well, if she said she wasn't interested, what does it matter if she's seeing someone or not? You're like, listen. Anyway, but they worked through that. It ended up being great. That was the one by Jackie D'Alessandro. I ended up really enjoying that one a fair amount. These are spicy and quite racy, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. It was between a florist and a firefighter. And then the third one, I enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed the female protagonist, but it did have a racial stereotype in it as someone to make the plot happen, which wasn't great. That being said, this title again is older. I think it's 2007, which is not that old, but it was a little. So, but because it was purely to drive the stereotype. It was a wise man, and situation, and so that was a little not the best. But overall, I read. I'm not sure. Overall, I finished the title, so I'm thrilled about that. And then what I did end up doing was my daily page count. I used the pages from Overdrive for this one because I could calculate them. And then at the end of the week, I adjusted my total to what I had previously thought was the page count, because that's what the page count I use on my spreadsheet and in my notes for how much I thought was left in the book. So I did make an adjustment for that. So throughout the week, it felt like I read 622 pages, but after making the adjustment for that one book, it was down to 513 pages, which hits my goal of 375 pages, and I actually hit it pretty early, depending on how we look at it. So here is my daily pages. It was actually very high right from the forefront: 149, 130, 82, 167, 44, 89, 1. That was one alphabet. So I actually, most days, 5 out of the 7 days, I read over 75, which is the goal. But then overall, I hit 375 on day 4, but I almost hit it on day 3. So I felt very relaxed throughout the rest of the week in terms of my reading, but I very much kept at it. And I actually read sort of twice throughout the day, sort of early evening, which is sort of the normal time I read. And then most of the titles I also read again at night, late at night. So I'm not sure what magic happened to make that happen, but I'm thrilled about that. So, and this makes me feel better that last week I only got to 333. So it's just 40 pages, 45 pages, 42 pages shy of my goal, because this week I read 375, 20-ish pages more. So those two, if you even them out, I'm ahead of the game. So I'm really happy about that. Yeah, and I wasn't buddy reading as much this week. Me and Anita are still reading Night Embrace. Feels like we're going to wrap that up pretty soon. So that might have something to do with it. Yeah, so maybe that was the difference. I was reading some of my other titles as well. I can't remember off the top of my head what they were. Mostly kids' books, visual works, another, that kind of stuff. So there was nothing else that was that I was focusing on. And also, like, I really enjoyed this. This was variable. This was only so-so. And then I loved The Blaze. The Blaze was great. That got me inspired because I want to read more Blazes. The line doesn't produce any more copies, but they have I think it's just shy of 1,000 titles. And my library has tons of them. Most of them are in bind-ups of 6 books. So that does make it the whole page count thing a challenge. But it's, I'm not worried about it too much. And I did find a way to adjust it in the end. And it ended up being fine. And I finished it, which is great. Yay! And so as the week turned on Saturday, which is when I do my Goodreads update, I got back down to 30. So last week I was at 30 by the end of the week. This week I was at 30 by the end of the week. So I'm happy about that. I am not increasing it, which is good. And but sort of mostly stayed the same. So maybe next week I will get into the 20s, which would be delightful. So there you go. There is my update. I think things went really well this week. I enjoyed reading, it was really good. So mostly, it's kind of funny because even though I didn't enjoy this one, I'm still happy that I read so many pages. I'm still a bit flummoxed as to how I got all of those pages in this week. So who knew? I am not quite sure, but I think I did read a fair amount 6 out of the 7 days as opposed to 5. I think that might have had something to do with it. I thought I wasn't going to. There was one day I thought, oh, I'm not going to get any reading in, and then I did. So maybe that's what made the difference. So I'm thinking of it as a bonus, not the new normal, and I am looking very forward to seeing what I pick next. You will already know because that video will already be up, and so I will be back with another video soon. Thank you so much for watching.